Welcome to GTR. My name is Mark, and this is Three Things, the show where I take a look at a game I've recently played, and I tell you three things I like about the game that I wouldn't change, and three things that I would change. Okay, today we're talking about Raccoon Tycoon, specifically the deluxe edition with the Fat Cat expansion. So this is kind of the whole tricked out game. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are probably not going to apply to you if you just have the base game, the non-deluxe edition, or if you don't have the Fat Cat expansion. Some of these things may not apply to you. That doesn't mean it's not relevant. It just, if you upgrade or get to this, you'll understand why. So without any further ado, let's start at number 1. So number 1, in the deluxe edition with the Fat Cat expansion comes player boards. Player boards that are slotted nonetheless, which kind of hold your building tiles and hold all your resources, and it gives you a beautiful visual representation into your city. And after I've played with these player boards a number of times, I've thought back to myself, how did we play this game without player boards? You would just have so many resources and pieces just on the table in front of you. It'd be so hard to keep track of and not be able to visualize. This player board just keeps everything in sync, keeps everything tracked, and it just gives you some domain and space to really visualize what you're doing. The player boards, I think, are a must in Raccoon Tycoon. I think they should be in the regular game of Raccoon Tycoon. I think the player board should just be there without question. It really adds a great dynamic to the game. There's individual slots where you can put all of your resources. And the other thing is there's this kind of invisible hand limit or resource limit that you can have. And that is, at the beginning of the game, you only get 10 resources. And there's no way to know that other than just knowing that or remembering that. But with the player board, it's distinct that you only get these 10 slots to fill. If you get buildings that increase your storage limit, then that's indicated as well. And it's kind of that visual cue to say, I can only store these 10. And that really helps you make those decisions when you're looking for resources to produce. You can just have this representation. And so with that said, before we ever got the player boards, we made our own kind of, we got like a piece of plastic, like a paper cover, like something you put in a binder with like the plastic sheet, you put a sheet in it, and we got dry erase markers, and we printed out a piece of paper with all the resources on it, and we would just keep track that way so that we knew how many we had, because it was just impossible to keep track of all the resources that are constantly flying in and out of your hand. So the player board that keeps track of the resources is a must, and the fact that it has a place for your buildings that just keeps them locked in there is also excellent. It's not as much of a must for me, but it's all included in it works perfectly for the game. I think the player board is a must in the base game. So that's number 1, the indented player board for all your resources and your buildings and whatnot. Number 2, something that I wouldn't change about the game is the paper money. Paper money gets a bad rap in games, I think specifically because of Monopoly, and so many people have traumatic memories of Monopoly. And paper money gets a bad rap. And I get it, but at the same time I don't, because Power Grid is one of my favorite games, and that has paper money, and I love it. And this has paper money, and I love it. And it kind of harkens back to these older games of just having paper money. And it's this really great resource that lets you get to keep this money in your hand, and it's hidden, and you're in these auctions, and you're kind of looking down and counting your money. That, to me, that tactile element of the game is necessary. If you had some sort of a resource tracker or some way to keep track of your money that wasn't physically represented by bills, I think I would really miss that aspect of the game where you're in this auction, you're kind of counting your money, and everybody's looking down at the bills, and and then exchanging that when you win the auction, exchanging that with the banker, that whole transaction. I think for me, if it didn't have the paper money, if I never play it with the paper money, I might not notice it. But I think if the paper money was taken out of the game, or if the way to track money was different, I feel like I would lose. I would lose that. I would lose that nature of the game that it gives me. So, and the other thing is, this money is much different than your standard paper money. Everyone that plays this comments on how thick the money feels, and for how much we've played this game, this money is in pristine condition, which is surprising. I mean, a lot of people have handled these bills, and a lot of transactions have happened, and this money is held up. So that's a good indication of how good quality this paper money is. It's not your standard Monopoly or Power Good money. This is good, high quality stuff. And so that's number 2, is the money, because of the kind of thematic ties to the game, the whole exchanging of money. I think that's necessary in the game and would have to be in there for me. Number 3 is this is just base game stuff. So if you have the base game, this is applicable to you. Number 1 was an upgrade. Number 3 is also an upgrade. Number 3 are the player shields that come with the Fat Cat expansion. So there are, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 player shields that each player can get, and you can put it up in front of you to hide your money, which the original game tells you, keep your money secret. But sometimes that's hard to do in a game. It says you can keep your money hidden. But sometimes that's hard to do, and you get keep it in your pocket or something. And then if that's the case, then sometimes you just don't hide your money. But this game I think it's necessary that you hide your money. So you either keep it in your pocket, or you've got a hoodie, you keep it stuffed in there or on a chair next to you. I think you've got to keep your money hidden. Absolutely. You're not going to win. That's key for winning auctions. But this kind of gives you a player shield that you can put in front of you. You can hide your money in front of it, and that's cool. The other thing that those player shields do is it also kind of introduces player or character powers, which I think is neat, because that wasn't something that was in the original game, and this is just another way to either help you score points or to make something easier. So there could be a power that says collect $8 on your first turn. There's one that at one point in the game you can move a commodity. You can move a commodity down to the lowest spot on the tracker. So just bottom out that resource, and you can see who might be looking to cash that in, and you just plummet that stock, and you take $5 for doing that. That's probably my favorite power, because if you play it at the right time, can be very, very cutthroat. And I don't think that the game has a lot of that take that mechanism where you're hurting other people. And again, that's like one power that does that. There's very few powers or things in the game that really affect other people. And the bottom line is that might not even affect someone. You might look at them and say, oh, they have a lot of those resources, I'm going to plummet the value of that one. And then they don't even care. They use it to cash it in to trade for a town card. So it's not like it's so cutthroat that you're going to mess up someone's whole game by doing that. But just adding those specific powers in makes it interesting, and it kind of gives character to who you are. And the artwork on the shields are nice, and kind of got a male and a female version of each of the characters that are found in the game. And I think that's a great addition to the game. Really solid. I think it could be added into the base game with no problems, and I think it should have been included in the base game. So that's number 3 that I wouldn't change about the game, are the player shields, as well as, and I'm grouping these together because the player shields have the player powers on them. So I'm just kind of grouping those as one thing, that you get a shield to hide your money, and then there's additional powers, either start of the game powers or mid game powers or even end game scoring powers. So I think that's an excellent addition to a game that originally didn't have a ton of ways to score points. It was either 3 things. It was either towns, railroads, or buildings. So this just added more ways to spend your money or to get resources. So that's it for the 3 things that I wouldn't change about Tycoon. So let's move on to the 3 things that I would change about Tycoon if I had the option or if I wanted to house rule them. Number 1 is the auction. The game fundamentally centers itself around the auction. Now, I don't have a problem with auctions in games. In fact, I really enjoy auctions in games. Again, I'm coming back to Power Grid. Power Grid is one of my favorite games, and it has a lot of auction in it, and I really enjoy it. What I don't overly like about the auction in this game, and I get flack for it sometimes when I play this because I'm always hemming and hawing at the auctions and thinking that it could be different and changed. The one thing I don't like, and I will say that it's interesting that I don't like it, but it's addressed in the 2-player version of the game. Okay, so when it's your turn, you can do a number of things, but one thing you can do is call an auction, and you can bid on one of these railroads. And then you have a minimum starting bid here. And then it goes around the table in a standard auction fashion, and you go around, and each player either bids up, whatever they want. Either they want to go 1 up or they want to bid 15 up. It doesn't matter. So you can either bid or pass. Once you pass, you're out. And if you don't pass, you can just keep going around the table until someone gets it. That's great and all, but what I found is the game kind of ebbs and flows in the sense of everybody kind of puts up resources, cashes in money, and then there's just these number of turns that are just constantly auctions. And the auctions can go, if you're playing with 6 people, which this expansion gives you a 6-player board or the stuff for 6 players, there can be a lot of auctions, and that can just be a little bit kind of repetitive and just constantly auctioning and auctioning. And if you get into this kind of auction slump where one person starts an auction and then they take a couple of rounds because they didn't get the auction. They started an auction but they didn't win it, so that means they get to start over. They can either take another auction or a different action, but more than likely they're trying to get a railroad. So they might do 2-3 auctions, and then the next person might do 2-3 auctions, and you have no money to contribute to any of these auctions, and so you're just sitting there going, we've just went through 8 auctions and I can't buy any of them because I didn't have any money. And that's kind of a product of playing with 6 people. That wouldn't be such a big deal if you're playing with 3. You're not going to get that many. There's not going to be that many railroads auctioned off. But when you're playing with a higher player count, there is a lot of times where you're going to be like, I have $3 and there's an auctions going off and I can't get into them. So that's one thing about the auction that bothers me. And the way that the 2-player addresses the 2-player rule that addresses that in the rule book, it says that let's say you're playing a 2-player game and I start an auction, I get 1 chance to bid on that. And so whatever the starting price is, I can say that, but then my opponent all they have to do is just beat it by 1. So this Sly Fox is worth $3. If I say $10. Right off the bat, my opponent either has to bet 11 or pass. Now, I don't think that's going to work with 6 players, but I would be interested in kind of playing with house rules in terms of the auctions just to make them not be as long. And sometimes you can start off at $3, right, for this one, and it can go around the table and it ends up selling for $40, and every player went up by 1 increment, and you go, okay, just move on with the auction here. And then all of a sudden that one gets over and then the next person starts another auction. So again, I don't dislike auctions, but in this game, it can, at larger player counts, for me, get out of hand. And then the sub point to the whole auction thing is there's one building in the game that's called the auction house, and that gets $5 to the person that holds an auction. And so there's a bit of a broken mechanism where you can have someone that does a runaway auction. They get the auction house, they spend $15 on it, they get the auction house, and they just start putting up the auctions and not winning them. They just say, they start the auction, they start the bid, and then they pass. And they just keep doing that, and then they keep getting $5 every time they hold one of those auctions. Now, again, you have to weigh the pros and the cons there. If you do that 10 times, you're going to get $50. $50 is a good chunk of change. It's not crazy, but it's a good chunk of change. But what you have to think of is you're getting those $50, but you're also giving your opponents points by just auctioning off all of those railroads. So I don't think it's broken. I don't think that building tile is necessarily broken. But I do know that, and no one in my group does it deliberately, but I do know that when you get that auction house tile and you start just ramping up all the auctions and you start raking in all that cash, it's great if you do it, but sometimes when someone else does it, I get a little upset about it. And so there's two things surrounding the whole auction thing that I wish I could tighten up or just streamline a little bit better. The auctions can just run out of hand sometimes. So that's number one is the whole auctioning. I would love to just tighten that up and streamline that. Number two is the production cards. On your turn, you can either start the auction or you can play a production card from your hand. You have 3. That can change based on buildings you get, might increase that. And then on the bottom of the card, you can produce up to 3 of the amount of icons that are on there. There could be 3, there could be 4, there could be 5. You can produce up to 3. That can also change based on the buildings you buy. That might increase that. The thing is, while I do really enjoy that, that's excellent. Just play a card, increase the resources that show on the top of the card, increase the value by 1, and then take 3 things from the bottom. I think that is a great mechanism. And that's a lot of what you're going to be doing is playing these cards, increasing the value, and taking the resources, and then selling them later on at those values to buy auctions or to buy railroads in towns. But my problem with it is you get 3 cards, and sometimes you might be really needing a specific resource, either for an end game trigger or fulfillment or something. You might need specific resources, whether it's to get a town card, whatever it may be. But you've got these 3 cards, and there's nothing specifically in the rules that allow you to refresh those. I wish that there was a way, and there is a way. You can just house rule it to say, if you don't like your cards, spend a resource, spend a resource to cash in all 3 and take 3 new ones, and that's it. You either get all new or all nothing. Just spend a resource. That's one option. But there are a number of times where I've played the game and people I'm playing with the game they ask me, hey, wait, just before we go any further, can you cash these in? Can you trade these in? I want to get new ones. And you go, yeah, no, there's really no way to do that natively in the rules. So that's something I would change. I would write in the rules that you can refresh your hand of 3 in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be free. You can associate a payment with it. Again, whether you pay $10 or you pay a resource, whatever it is, or you have to decrease the value of something in the market. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I think there should be a way built in the game where you can refresh these. We haven't house ruled it yet, but now that we're playing it a bunch and everyone asks me about it, I think I'm going to house rule something that allows you to refresh those 3 cards in some manner. So that's number 2, refreshing your hand of production cards. Number three is, to me, a big one. Okay, it's big, and that is that the rule book is very unclear. It leaves a lot to be desired, and it leaves a lot to question. For example, and I don't know if this is just a Kickstarter stretch goal that was unlocked, but you have these end game mission cards, which are great. If you've watched my last 3 things, you will know that I wanted to include some sort of end game mission card into Praga. And I really enjoy end game mission cards. And I don't have anything specific to say about these mission cards, except for the fact that they are not in the rulebook. They are not in the rulebook for the original game, and they are not in the rulebook for the expansion of the game. Which is fine, except for, and I can't find this anywhere online, they're all pretty self-explanatory. Either 1 point per resource, and they're just whatever resource it says. They might say have the most town cards at the end of the game. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just there's nothing in the rules that refers to them, and so there's nothing to deal with ties. What do you do if it says have the most towns? Well, what if you don't have them? What if you and someone else have the same amount of towns? it doesn't tell you what to do in the event of a tie. Now, we've just assumed that the rule or the tiebreaker would be the tie goes to the person who has the card. So if I'm scoring who has the most towns, and me and you both have 5 towns, well, I have the card, so I get it. And we're totally fine with that because there's no way to know. The mission is secret, so you can't be deliberately trying to sabotage somebody's end game mission because you don't know what it is. So it doesn't make sense that you'd be trying to keep that from somebody anyways. So anyways, with all that said, the rules aren't very clear. So there's nothing in there surrounding those mission cards, but that's fine. The other thing is there is nothing to do with the buildings. There's a lot of buildings in the game that do various things. You start out with the game with getting buildings that can give you 1 additional resource or 2 additional resources. My problem is that we've played the game a number of different ways over the year. I mean, we've had this game for quite a while. So we've played it a number of different ways, meaning we were getting so for this tile here that says +1 to any resource, we were getting it that you could add 1 to the resource if you were producing it, whatever. So, but then we found out later that we reread the rules and it was kind of different. So we went, oh, this is a little bit different. So we had to change the way we played the game. Then there's a couple of building tiles that aren't very clear. It says get $1 for every iron or coal sold, and that's what it says. And there's no clarification in the rule book, and so you say, okay, well, every time I sell a coal or an iron, I'll get an extra $1. And we were playing that way, and it just didn't seem that tile was very beneficial. But then I looked online, and I found this whole page that kind of explained the buildings a little more, and it said you get $1 for every coal or iron when anybody sells it. Okay, then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, every time you sell coal or iron, I get like money. So if you sell 5 coal to the market and you get all your money for it, I get $5 because you sold 5 of them. That becomes lucrative for me, and it kind of hampers other people in terms of like, well, I don't want to sell 8 iron to the market because that's going to give him $8. Now, $8 isn't huge, but if you're playing with 6 people and everybody's doing that, your money can rack up pretty quick. And so all of a sudden that tile or that building that wasn't very lucrative and didn't make much sense, all of a sudden it became very coveted. And we were trying to get that tile and that building. So there wasn't a lot of clarification in the rule book about that. And so there has just been a number of times over the plays that we've done where oftentimes your first play, you read the rule book, you play the game, you're playing it, and you're looking through, you're referencing the rule book a few times, and then after that, unless you don't play the game for a year or whatever, you just play the game and you've got it, you know what you're doing. But almost every time we play this game, we've played it lots, we always go to the rule book to try to find some sort of clarification, or we go online to try to find some clarification. I'm looking through BGG forums to say, did anybody talk about this specific building? What does it actually mean? So I think the rule book could have been a lot clearer about the game flow. So I feel like the rules are kind of missing and lead to some interpretation, which can result in, if your play group is pretty easygoing, it can result in whatever. But the game is long. If you're playing with 6 players, which the Fat Cat expansion allows you to do, and you play with the Fat Cat expansion, you can be playing for upwards of 2.5 hours. And if you've got serious gamers that are trying to play this game, and you find out that you've been playing a building wrong or a card wrong, and you find out at the end, and you go, oh yeah, well, I read this rule afterwards, and it gives me this many points. You could have some upset players at the table because sometimes it's not entirely clear, or the card means something different than what it says. But again, that can be mitigated by after a few plays, getting to know everything, and then you can explain those things to new players or explain that at the start of the game. And oftentimes we've had to say, okay, we figured out a rule midway, and we said, okay, the next time we'll keep it the way we were playing it for now, but next time we'll make that change. And so we've done that a few times with Tycoon, and that leads me to believe that the rules aren't as clear as they could be, because I can't think of too many other games that I've played where I've had that same experience. So that's number 3. The rulebook needs an overhaul. It needs a lot more explanation. It needs to be way more streamlined and have a lot more explanation of all the different things you can do in the game. All right, that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching to the end. I appreciate you. And until next time, peace.